in that position and you look forward, when you're ready, you yell, ready.
Ready.
Okay? And then it goes back to me, and I give the command, fire. Okay. Fizzle, do not advance. Primer is failed. We're going to assume. Okay, this is going to make a little bit of a noise, so you might want to cover your ear. Fire! Fire! Cease fire. Morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing this morning? My name's Steve Robertson. I'm a park ranger here at Gatlin State Park in South Mountain State Battlefield. And what we're going to be doing today is demonstrating the loading and firing of a Civil War cannon. So when we fire the cannon, it does make quite a loud noise. On this side of this stone wall, we're all required to wear hearing protection because of the sound that the cannon makes. Back there on top of the wall where you are, you're safe distance away from the cannon, so the noise shouldn't damage your hearing, but I will let you know when we're ready to fire. If loud noises bother you, you might want to cover your ears, and also if anybody's wearing a hearing aid today, they might want to turn it down a bit. Keep in mind when we fire the cannon today, we'll be firing about a pound of powder. This particular cannon, we're going to talk a little bit more about the cannon after we fire it, but this particular cannon during the Civil War would have fired 2 to 2.5 pounds of powder depending on what type of projectile they were firing. So the sound is only going to be about half as loud as it would have been during the Civil War. So when you hear the noise, you want to actually amplify it a little bit or multiply it a little bit, and then just imagine dozens of these cannons going off during a battle, along with hundreds or even thousands of muskets. Battlefields are very noisy places and very smoky places. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll fire the cannon. After the cannon fires, I have some of the different types of projectiles that they fired out of this cannon. We're going to talk about the cannon, talk about different types of projectiles, so if you want to stick around for that, you can. We're actually going to fire 3 times, so we're going to fire the cannon, talk a little bit, fire the cannon a second time, talk some more, and then fire the final 3rd round. So, like I said, if you'd like to, you can stick around for all 3 firings. So, with that, we'll go ahead and we'll fire. Ready. And here's both. Ready. Okay, so this command will be the command to fire, so you might want to cover your ears.
He was just saying that's a smaller
Okay,
charge
so
than what they would
cannon,
use in the war.
the cannon that we're firing today is technically known as a model 1857 light 12-pound gun howitzer, which is a very long, very technical name. They thought so too during the Civil War, so they actually gave this cannon a nickname, and they simply called it a 12-pound Napoleon. So if you're at a Civil War battlefield and you see references to 12-pound Napoleons, or if you're reading about the Civil War and you see references to 12-pound Napoleons, this is the cannon that they're talking about. So this cannon, the barrel is made out of bronze, which is fairly soft metal. The advantage of bronze is that it will expand and contract. So when it heats up, when it's hot outside like it is today, you fire the cannon a lot, the barrel will actually expand without bursting. So that adds a lot of advantages. Sometimes with cannon barrels that were made out of iron during the Civil War and before the Civil War, they had problems with them bursting when they got hot and they tried to expand. So bronze is actually a really good material to make a cannon barrel out of. Our cannon is also a smooth bore. There's no rifling, there's no grooves cut into the inside of the barrel. So if you're familiar with modern weapons, it's like a large shotgun barrel. So the basic projectile that our cannon fires is a round, solid cannonball. And this cannonball weighs about 12 pounds. So that's where the cannon gets its name, 12 pounder. This 12-pound cannonball, and this doesn't explode. This is kind of like firing a 12-pound bowling ball, if you will. This cannonball could be fired at long range, which for this cannon is about 1 mile. So if you're trying to hit a target at a long range, you might use this solid shot. This is also good for trying to knock down fortifications or knock down buildings, maybe try to hit other cannons. But you might think that, that's not very effective. Well, they put a backspin on the football. That spin makes the football go further, makes it fly straighter. Same idea with rifled cannons. So rifled cannons had a range, because of that rifling, because of that spinning motion, they had a range of about 2 miles, about twice the distance of our smoothbore cannon. But there's some disadvantages to rifles. Earlier I mentioned that our cannon's made out of bronze. Bronze is a soft metal. They experimented with making rifles out of bronze. Didn't work very well because the riflings themselves actually would wear out of the inside of the barrel very quickly. Because they had to make them out of iron, a harder metal, they would tend to burst, they would tend to wear out a lot faster. The other disadvantage is that and a rifle has all the same types of projectiles I just talked about. You had solid projectiles, which in this case they called bolts. They had explosive shells, they had K-shot, and they had canister. Keep in mind that with a rifle, a canister round is going to be this size, with our smoothbore canister round is this size. So if you're standing in position where this cannon is today, and you're defending this position, and you've got enemy troops right down there in that tree line, what size canister are you going to want to use? The 12-pound canister or the smaller rifle canister. So both rifles and smoothbore cannons continue to be used by both armies, both Union and Confederate armies throughout the Civil War. They just were tended to be used for different purposes. If you had a target that was long distance, they would tend to use rifles. If you were firing at targets that were close, so you were more of a close combat situation, you'd use smoothbore cannons. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to fire the cannon again. And when we're ready to fire, I'll let you know so you can cover your ears.
Dick wants to go after this one.
And here's post.
We were going to go to Frederick and get some pizza. Yep.
Hey, 800 yards. Blue.
So I think they stick that in first and make sure there's nothing stuck in the barrel. See it have like a lock on the end.
So,
Come along with us. Jacob's tired of the
just
bus.
in case
Yeah,
you're wondering,
everything.
we are only firing blanks today. We're not firing any type of projectile, any type of cannonball. And also you'll notice that our cartridges are made out of tin foil. They're not made out of wool or out of cloth. Foil tends to be a lot safer than using cloth, and I'll say more about that later on. So as you can see, it takes quite a few people to load and fire one of these cannons. We actually could use a few more people if we wanted to do this really efficiently and had to do it really quickly. An actual cannon detachment would consist of about 8 people. That's not including all the people that they would need to handle ammunition and bring up forces and the extra ammunition and things of that nature. But on the cannon itself, we have just enough today. And I want to talk a little bit about what each person does in the loading process. So, in the detachment that we have here today, I'm the only person who has a title or has a name, and I'm called the gunner.
No. You sure?
Typically during the Civil War, whether it's the Union Army or the Confederate Army, the gunner is going to be a corporal. And the job of the gunner is to give commands, as I'm doing. Sometimes they're going to call for different types of ammunition. They're going to call for ranges. Sometimes that information may be coming from further up in the chain of command. But it's also up to the corporal or the gunner to make sure that everybody knows what their job is, that they're all well trained, they're doing their jobs and doing it efficiently. So those of you who are familiar with military organization, corporal is not a very high rank, so that's a lot of responsibility for that individual. Other than the gunner, everybody on this cannon detachment is simply referred to by number. So I'm going to go around by number and talk about what each person does. Number 1. So number 1 is holding up what's called a sponge rammer. And at the upper end of that sponge rammer is what looks like a big dirty Q-tip. That's actually a lamb's wool sponge. That's dipped in a bucket of water and that's put down into the barrel in between each round. What he's trying to do is extinguish any burning embers that might be there from the last round. There might be a piece of this wool bag inside the cannon, burning, smoldering. You don't want that in there when you put the next round in, so hopefully that wet sponge is going to extinguish that. On the other end of his sponge rammer is a wooden block, and that's actually the rammer that's going to be used to ram or to push the round down to the back of the barrel once it's put inside the cannon. Number 2. Number 2 is holding a corkscrew type device called a worm. And that worm is used to clear any debris that might be inside the barrel. Now during the Civil War, they would only use the worm to pull out some kind of obstruction if they thought there was something inside the cannon barrel. We use it every time we fire because the aluminum foil cartridges that we use tend to leave a hunk of aluminum foil inside the cannon barrel. Of course, we need to get that out before we load again. The other very important job that number 2 does is he's going to take the round once it's brought up to the cannon, and he's actually going to place it inside the cannon barrel. Number 3. Number 3 has a number of different jobs, starting with their left thumb. On their left thumb, they have a thumb stall, a leather thumb stall, and that's going to be placed over the vent. Dave, could you show him? Placed over the vent, which is a small hole at the back of the barrel. And he's going to do that while we're loading the cannon. What he's doing is he's cutting off any air from getting in through the vent during the loading process. Remember I said there might be a piece of smoldering debris inside the barrel from the last round. Putting the thumb stall over top of the vent along with putting the sponge down into the barrel creates a vacuum, cuts off all the oxygen inside the barrel, is going to help extinguish any burning or hot embers that are inside the barrel. Number 3 also has a vent pick or priming wire. And once the round is put into the cannon and rammed down to the back of the barrel, that's going to be placed inside that vent, and that's used to punch a hole in the powder bag, exposing the powder on the inside. And then number 3 is going to also help with the loading process, or I'm sorry, with the aiming process. So the gunner has what's called a pendulum hawse. The pendulum hawse is essentially the rear sight for the cannon, and this is adjustable. It's in a scale of degrees of elevation, so I can adjust it to whatever degrees I want. Say we'll adjust it to 2 degrees elevation. This is going to be placed in a bracket at the back of the barrel, and then your basic aiming process is I'm going to look through the pendulum hawse, and I'm going to line up the pendulum hawse with the fixed sight on the front of the barrel and the target downrange. So basic aiming process like with any other type of weapon. If I need to move the cannon barrel up or down, raise or lower the cannon barrel, I'm going to use this elevating screw underneath the back of the barrel. And as I said earlier, that's how we vary the distance that the cannon is going to fire, by raising and lowering the barrel depending on the degrees of elevation. Now, if I want to move the cannon barrel, if I want to point it to the left or right, that's where number 3 comes in. So he's going to go back and he's going to hold on to what's called the trail handspike. And as I'm aiming, I'm going to tap the side of the trail, this wooden piece on the cannon. As I tap the trail, that's going to tell him which direction to move the back of the cannon to point the cannon in different directions. Once I'm satisfied with the way the cannon is aimed, I'm going to put my hands up in the air, taking what a lot of us know as a football touchdown motion. And incidentally, just so you know, we did not steal that from the NFL. The NFL stole it from us. This was actually being done back in the Civil War, so that everybody knows the cannon is aimed properly, and we're ready to move on to the next step. Number 4. Number 4 is essentially the trigger man for a cannon. So he has a lanyard, and that lanyard is a piece of rope that has a wooden handle at one end and has an iron hook at the other end. On that iron hook, he's going to place a friction primer. So the friction primer is a brass or copper tube that has a black powder compound on the inside and then has this wire sticking out of the side. That hook's going to hook into that wire. This is placed in the vent, and then when the command to fire is given, he's going to pull the lanyard, and that hook is going to pull that wire out of the friction primer. That's going to create enough friction to create enough heat to ignite the priming tube, which will burn down the powder inside the cannon and set the cannon off. And as you can see from the last couple times we fired the cannon, if the cannon is properly maintained and everything is working properly, that all happens instantaneously. And then back here at the limber, we have number 5. And number 5 has what's called a gunner's haversack on his side. That's a leather pouch. That leather pouch is going to be used to carry the ammunition from the ammunition chest up to the cannon. Now, ideally, in addition to number 5, we're going to have a number 6 and a number 7 who are going to always stay back there at the ammunition chest, and they're going to prepare the ammunition as it's called for. So, if we're going to fire a solid shot or a canister, which doesn't require a fuse, it's all very simple. They just take that out of the ammunition chest, put it in number 5's pouch, and he takes it up to the cannon. If it's case or shell, then when that type of round is called for, I'm also going to call out a range. So you might have noticed last time I called for case, at 800 yards. So that tells number 6 and number 7 that they need to take out a case shot, they need to take out a fuse, they need to cut that fuse so that when that case goes 800 yards down range, the case will explode. So they're going to have to do some math, some calculations, cut fuses, put the fuses in the rounds, and they're going to have to do that pretty quickly because they don't want to hold up the whole loading and firing process. Now I should also mention that two-wheeled cart is called a limber. So we have the cannon, we have the limber. The limber is used for a couple of different purposes. One is to move the cannon. So on the back of the cannon where Caleb is standing, there's actually a hitch, an iron hitch. On the back of the cannon, at the very end of the trail, is an iron tube or an iron loop, a lunette. We can lift up that cannon, we can hook it onto the limber, and that turns that two-wheel cannon, of course, into a four-wheel vehicle, makes it a lot easier to move. The pole that's sticking out of the front of the limber is used to harness horses to the limber. So with a cannon like ours, typically in the Union Army, they're going to use at least 6 horses. In the Confederate Army, oftentimes they could only have 4 because of the lack of resources. But those 4 or 6 horses are going to then be used to pull the limber and the cannon. If we were actually here fighting a battle and we had all the proper equipment, we would actually have 4 to 6 horses harnessed to that limber, and we would do it while we're here fighting the battle. Why do we leave the horses harnessed to the limber? Because we need to get out of Dodge and we need to get out quick. That way they can just bring the limber up, we can hitch it up, and we can get going. So those horses would actually stay harnessed to the limber. So you can imagine we don't really have room here for horses. During a battle, that limber is actually going to be further away, and the distance that number 5 is going to have to cover is going to be larger, bringing the ammunition up. And as I mentioned, that box on top of the limber is the ammunition chest for the cannon. And that, for our cannon, that carries about 32 rounds of ammunition. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to fire the cannon one last time. And again, I'll let you know when we're ready to fire so you can cover your ears if you'd like to. And here's post. Canister. Load. Ready. Okay, and again, the next command is the command to fire, so you may want to cover your ears. Fire! Cease fire. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for coming out to our program today. In just a few minutes,